Well, ladies and gentlemen, to begin with, first and foremost, my name is Prajakta Bhagat. I'm going to be your moderator and host for today's webinar. And it gives me absolute privilege and honor to be extending a very warm welcome to all the enthusiastic participants who are joining us for today's webinar. This initiative has been taken by ACBM Global Mentor Academy in association with its global partner, H&C Education. And our topic for today's webinar is how to crack admissions in Ivy League universities and colleges for Masters in Business Administration. Well, ladies and gentlemen, I would like to begin with a quote. They say that to be a successful person, it takes a lot of willpower, it takes a lot of perseverance, it takes a lot of hard work. Uh, a passion to achieve, a desire to be different, and the drive to excel are some of the key ingredients of any exceptional performance. But what is exception all about? Well, we strongly believe and we always claim that perfection has been our very philosophy in laying our foundation. So let's find out from the man himself who has been redefining perfection, and his journey has been a testimony, and he's absolutely the epitome of perfection. May I please invite Mr. Pia Yuge, who is going to be our speaker. Welcoming you. Hi there. How are you doing?
Pretty good. I'm doing good. Thank you. Thanks for your introduction.
My pleasure. So, Pia, I have read about you a lot and I've been beaming with a lot of pride, and I'm absolutely thrilled to be having you on board. So would you like to talk about your journey? What was, what intrigued you to pursue career into guidance, and, what was your mantra? What was your inclination to be where you are, in your life right now? And how did your journey begin in the first place? If you could, give us some insights and gist about it before we can actually get on with the topic.
Sure. So I started HNC education a little over 2 years ago. And I've been in this industry for over 6 years now, slightly more. And what I was doing at first is helping friends and families navigate the admissions process. I grew up in France, moved to Canada, and then moved to the US for my PhD, where I studied at Yale. And once I got into Yale, I received inquiries from friends, family members about what it takes to navigate the admissions process. And I was just guiding them at first, just helping friends. What happened is while I was at Yale, I started the Yale Business Society, which is now a pretty big organization at Yale. And
we also got to know that you're the founding president of Yale Student Business Society, which is the largest entrepreneurship and management, focused on non-profit organizations. So how was that journey? How did the inception take place?
Yeah, so I was at Yale. I was very interested in business, even though I was in the humanities, studying literature and philosophy. And I wanted to get more involved in in business organizations at Yale. And what happened is there was a lack of organizations. There weren't enough business organization. And what I decided, it was just I would just start my own organization, the Yale Business Society. And when I did that, what I was doing is I was helping
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, I think you probably got disconnected for a second, right?
Am I audible?
I can hear you now. Can you hear me okay now? I think you got disconnected for a second, possibly.
Yeah, we can hear you, Pierre. You can go on. Thank you.
Okay, yeah. So I decided to create the Yale Business Society to help students launch their nonprofits or for-profit organizations. And
I believe
as I was
facing
doing this,
some technical errors. I think I should try leaving.
And as I was doing this, what I realized is that I could apply the same principles of helping students launch their nonprofits or for-profits to the admissions process. And that's pretty much how I shifted from the Yale Student Business Society to HNC Education, applying the same principles of leadership and business development to students who wanted to apply to MBA programs, colleges, or PhD programs. So that's pretty much how it started into business, founding the Yale Business Society, and then moving to HNC Education.
Okay. So, Priya, I would like to know that we have been hearing so much about Ivy League colleges. Almost every MBA aspirant, dreams about getting into the finest and top Ivy League college. So, would you like to explain the entire concept? What is Ivy League college and how does it differentiate from the rest of the B schools? And which are the top 10 colleges right now that if an individual is wanting to pursue or make a career by doing an MBA? And, how does one go about cracking or getting into one of the top college or university for that matter?
Sure. So the concept of Ivy League is actually an American athletic conference comprising of 8 private universities in the northeastern United States. So the term Ivy League is typically used beyond sports itself to refer to these 8 schools as a group of elite schools that have a connotation of academic excellence, highly selective schools, and social elitism as well. So the members of the Ivy League are in alphabetical order: Brown, Cornell, Dartmouth, Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, Princeton, and Yale. All
Yes.
of these schools have MBA programs except 2 of them, which are Brown and Princeton. When it comes to MBA programs per se, Harvard is usually tied first with University of Chicago Booth. So not all Ivies are necessarily ranked in the top MBA programs, even though they're still considered some of the most competitive schools. When it comes to the MBA programs, the top schools are in the Ivy League are Harvard. MIT is not considered in the Ivy League, but is in the same area, is usually tied third. So the top programs for MBA degrees are usually Chicago, Harvard, University of Pennsylvania, Stanford, MIT Sloan, Northwestern Kellogg, University of Michigan Ross, and University of Berkeley. There's also Columbia and Dartmouth and Yale that are very highly ranked, and these are obviously Ivy League schools as well.
Okay. Okay. Peter, before we break for the questions, I would like to understand the tuition fee, and as far as the scholarship program is concerned, would you like to elaborate a bit about that? Because there are a lot of students who try really hard, for making their ends meet, and it is their desire to get into Ivy League, but not everybody is from a privileged background. So, how does one provide any kind of financially for, catering problems of similar students who belong to that league or category?
Yeah, so that's a good question that I receive very often from international students. When it comes to MBA degrees, they're very, very expensive, especially if we're talking about the top 10 universities. So just to give you a sense, a single student applying to, let's say, Harvard will need to invest on average over 100,000 US dollars per year. So that's in total, including tuition fees, student health, course and program, room, living expenses. That's about 1.5 to 2 crores per year.
So and what is the academic criteria or the qualification that you look at while assessing the person's portfolio? I mean, do you have to, do you require a certain amount of percentage, or you have to score in every section, to a certain limit? What is it like? How do you assess the student?
Yeah, so the way students look, not students, but admissions officers and MBA programs look at the profile is clearly defined and it's a step-by-step process. So the different elements that are looked at by admissions officers are the transcript, the standardized test score, which is usually GMAT or GRE, that assess verbal and quant capabilities of the student. Then there's English exams for students who did not do their high school or college in English, which is usually the TOEFL or the IELTS or the Pearson test of English. Then there's the essay. The essay is usually a very broad question, pretty tough to respond, but that's also a very important piece of information in the application. Then there's the recommendation letters. Usually 2 recommendation can be from professional in the same industry, from former professors, anyone that can have a real impact in the application. And then there's obviously the resume, which is the leadership activity, anything that is related to the background of the student, things the student did to be ready for the MBA. And if the student goes through the profile and gets accepted or receives an invitation, then there's the interview. So that it gives you a clear picture of the full process. But obviously, this is just the application process, and students need to be ready well ahead of time before applying to college. They need to have leadership experience, they need to have the right professional experience, and they need to have the right score. So that's just the application process. But starting this application itself takes more than 1 year. Usually students come to us at least 2 years in advance to make sure that they're on track and they can be ready to apply to MBA programs.
Very impressive. Thank you, Priya. I think the conversation is just getting interested. Right now, I would like to invite Ms. Manasvi Mewada, who is a global ambassador with ACDM Global Mentor Academy, and she would like to ask some questions from her end. So I'm going to be connecting with you in a while.
Hi, sir. Good evening. How are you doing?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
Fine. So, sir, my question is, what is the set of pre-preparation that one should do to get into a good Ivy League college for MBA?
Yeah. So that's a good question, broad question as well. So what students should do? There's no one way to think about the MBA application process. Students are coming from diverse background. They don't necessarily have the same profile. So usually I like to advise students to start thinking about MBA degrees at least 1 to 2 years in advance, or right when they start their undergrad studies, if they feel strongly about doing an MBA. And the reason why I like to start so early is so that we can create a roadmap. And what we do in this roadmap, we plan everything in advance to make sure that the student is on track by the time he or she applies to colleges. What we can do and how we help students is planning for internships, professional development experience, testing timeline, letters of recommendation, anything that will be taken into account in the application. So sometimes, and we can talk more about this, I'm sure we'll have other questions about this, but students think that any kind of professional experience is good, and that's just not the case. Students need to have very specific leadership experience and show admissions officers that they're real problem solvers and that they can actually add something to the school. But usually 1 or 2 years ahead is a good time, or sometimes students just come to us just a couple of months before the application and they already have a very strong profile with a lot of experience, and that works just fine also.
Okay. Thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thank you, Manasvi. We hope we've been able to, get the answer for your question, and that was very rightly elaborated. Thank you so much, Priya. We have next global ambassador. May I please invite Khushi, who's going to be asking the next question to you. Khushi, are you here?
Yeah, hi.
Hi, Khushi.
Hello.
Hi, sir. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you doing?
I'm good too. So, sir, my question to you is, like, what is the structure of MBA course there? Is it different from rest of the institutions of the world? Is it like something different?
Yeah. So the structure of the MBA programs actually depend on there's two kind of MBA programs. There's highly specialized program. This can be leadership programs for CEO and executive position applicants. And there's the general, usually 2-year MBA degree. And this one is more of a general education. So within these two programs, you can find even more specialized degrees, such as Yale University, for instance, has a program in social entrepreneurship. And this program in social entrepreneurship can also be tied to other classes taken at other departments in the school. So the way I like to think about MBA is not just getting a diploma, but it's also getting to improve your skills and really build your profile to take it to the next level. So it depends on what students want to do. There's some great program in social entrepreneurship at Harvard or Yale, for instance. There's some highly ranked program in finance at Columbia because it's close to Wall Street, obviously. So it depends on what students want to do, but the program can be tailored to the needs of the students. There's no one general curriculum per se, but if students want to take a general curriculum, they can do that as well. So it depends on what students are looking for. And usually they need to do the research beforehand to find the best school that will be able to provide the right kind of guidance and skill building that they need.
Okay, thank you so much, sir, for answering this. I have one more query, sir. There's a question like which entrance exam we need to be given to qualify the Ivy League college? Like, is there any percentage matters for such college, or like there's something else also?
Yeah, that's a good question. So the entrance exams that need to be that students need to have before they apply to MBA degrees are usually the GMAT, which is a more quantitative oriented exam. This one, on average, it's ranked out of 800. 730 is usually a good number. That's a number that will help you get into any program in the US. So you don't need to be in the 100 percentile to get into top schools, but you need to reach a certain threshold so that you can be so that they can actually look at your profile. So there's the GMAT. 730 out of 800 is a good number that makes you highly competitive. The GRE as well is accepted very often by schools. Now they're not competing with the GMAT, but they're getting more popular. And for students, international students who did not study in English, there's the TOEFL or the IELTS if students attended a non-institution, non-English institution. And these are usually the main exams that students need to take to be eligible for MBA degrees.
Okay, thank you so much, sir. Over to you, ma'am.
Sure, thank you. I can hear you, Prajakta. You need to unmute.
I'm sorry. Yeah, I'm sorry.
Yeah, no worries.
May I please invite our next global ambassador, Ms. Ria, for asking the next question? Hi, Ria.
Hello, ma'am.
Hello,
Hi,
Ria.
sir. Hi, sir. How are you?
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm fine, sir. So my question for you is, how many students do appear in a year for Ivy Colleges League, and what is the success ratio?
Yeah, so it depends on the college, but on average, when it comes to the top, let's say 5 programs in the US, the average acceptance rate is between 6 and 11%. So just to give you an example, for Harvard, for instance, in 2019, there was a little over 1,000 applicants, 10,000 applicants, and full-time acceptances was around 1,000. But when it comes to schools like Stanford, for instance, the acceptance rate is around 6%. So we're talking about highly competitive schools, highly competitive programs, and that's why I usually advise students to be ready well in advance so that they can maximize the chances of getting into the right school for them.
Okay, sir. Add on to this, I would like to ask you, can you highlight about the entire procedure from the point of view of anyone for going into the Ivy College leagues?
Sure. So the main, I would say that a very important aspect of the application is obviously the transcript. So students need to have good grades. There's a certain threshold that they need to reach in order to be eligible or to be competitive at these schools. So transcript is one element. Then the second is standardized test score. If you don't have the right GMAT score, you're not going to be competitive at these schools. So once you've reached this kind of threshold for your transcripts, for your GMAT, TOEFL, obviously you need to pass the TOEFL, but that's not necessarily the hardest part of the application. Once you've done that, then the next element is definitely leadership experience. And that's why students need to be ready well in advance. Usually schools like to see around 50 months of professional experience, but this can vary. This can change a lot depending on the kind of impact that the student has had. So that's the process starting early. The transcripts, the GMAT, the TOEFL, And then when time comes to apply, it's writing the essay, finding the letters of recommendation, building your resume, and getting ready for the interview.
That's impressive. So I would like Prajakta ma'am to continue.
Thank you, Ria. May I please invite our last global ambassador, Mr. Yash Modi, to kindly put forward the next question before we can proceed further. Hi, Yash.
Hello. Hi, sir.
Hello,
Hope
yes.
you're having a great day.
Yes,
Yeah.
I have. Thank you.
So, sir, I wanted to ask you, apart from the GMAT scores or the exam scores, how much weightage is given to the this work experience or internships done by the students?
Yeah, that a good question again. So I'd like to say that none of the two internships or work experience are mandatory per se. And the definition of work experience and internship is actually very broad when it comes to MBA applications. Sometimes some students don't have an internship and do have professional experience, and this could work just fine. Others only have internship and don't have any work experience, and this could work just as well. And the reason why is because what MBA admissions offices want to see is not necessarily companies' names or anything that would reflect any kind of work experience. What they want to see is actually students who have had a real impact in what they've done. So if you did an internship at some random company, and even if it's not McKinsey or BCG, but you had a great impact in this company, you increased their return on investment, you reordered the leadership board, or anything you did that was actually impactful in the company will help you stand out in the admission process. So I don't like to think about work experience and internship as two necessarily mandatory things that you need to have on your profile, but rather what is the most impactful thing that you've done so far, and how can you quantify this impact in your applications. I've worked with students who were entrepreneurs. In that case, their work experience is that they started business and they hired themselves, and they don't necessarily have any internship activities. I work with students who just volunteered at some nonprofits, or even not nonprofits, or just decided to volunteer in their community and had a great impact. That's also something that will be highly valuable in the admissions process. So there's no regular work experience that you need to have to get into an MBA. What you really need to have and what matters is what the student did, how he did it or she did it, and being able to really quantify the impact of his or her activities. So how many people were impacted? How many people were helped? How many money did you raise for your nonprofit? These are way more important than just putting, McKinsey or Bain on your resume and being, I attended an internship for 4 weeks during summer at this great, company. If you did that, but there's no way for you to talk about what you did and the impact that you had, it's not going to make any difference at all. And maybe someone who just volunteered in his or her community but did it in a very impactful way will have more chances of standing out in the admissions process. So there's no one way to think about work experience and internship. And again, it's all about what you do and how impactful you do it.
Great. And so, what about the social work or NGO you are a part of? Does it hold weightage?
Yeah, of course they admissions offices do care about NGO social work. You don't have to be I guess when we talk about business programs, we're not necessarily talking about business per se, like making money. What we're talking about is more management. So what are your management skills? So if you can show real management skills at an NGO or in social work or in volunteering, Stanford, Harvard, Yale, or even top programs will care a lot about what you've done. And again, I mentioned earlier schools such as Stanford, Harvard, or Yale that have programs in social entrepreneurship. And maybe that can be a good fit for someone who wants to transition from an NGO and either wants to start his or her own NGO or remain in the same industry. That's something that an MBA degree can allow you to do and can help you with. So they consider any type of activity really, and activism can be also a great way to stand out. It's really about the impact.
Thank you so much, sir.
Sure.
I
Thank
loved
you.
your answers. And so one last question.
Sure.
If I take a letter of recommendation from a Rotarian, does that hold weightage?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on what the person has to say about you. I work with lots of students who have great, I mean, not necessarily great letters of recommendation, but letters of recommendation from great people, such as Joe Biden, for instance, who's currently, competing against Trump for the next election. So the question is not, who wrote the letter, but what's in the letter. And if you have a poor letter from a highly successful or ranked profile or personality, it will just look odd on your resume. It will just look like you don't have enough to say about yourself, or they don't have anything to say about you. So what's really important is someone who can actually talk about what you did in great details and tell admissions officers why they think that you deserve a spot in their university. So anyone can write a letter, really.
Thank you, sir. I would like Prajakta ma'am to continue.
Thank you, Yash. Thank you, Pierre, for addressing that so flawlessly. May I please invite Varun Keval Rumani, who's already set to be asking questions to you. Hi, Varun. How are you doing there?
Yeah, hi. Thank you, Prajakta. Hi, Pio. How you doing?
Pretty good. How are you?
Safe and sound. Thank you. I was actually taking notes of everything that you have been mentioning about the colleges, the examinations, and everything. But that made me wonder about one thing: that a decent percentage of people, the aspirants are there who would want to get into Ivy colleges, but they can't, and they're not able to make it. So what exactly are the reasons? And is there one piece of advice that you would like to give to the people who are planning to go into it and they could avoid it, they could put emphasis on those specific points?
Yeah. So that's a good question, and there's definitely lots of students who want to get into Ivy Leagues and can't necessarily make it, and there's lots of reasons for that. Usually, I mentioned it briefly, but a core test score is one thing that can very quickly disqualify you. If you don't meet the requirements for the GMAT or for the GRE, if you decide to take the GRE or the TOEFL, then you will go to the lower part of the admissions pile, and they simply won't read your application. So once you've reached the GMAT score, GRE, or TOEFL score that the admissions offices are looking for, the second element that students usually don't have is a lack of leadership experience. Sometimes they do have great GMAT scores, they do have great GRE and TOEFL scores, but they just don't have any leadership experience. Students, again, tend to think that internships or job at prestigious firms are just enough to get into a top B program, and that's, again, not the case. They're looking for real problem solvers and innovators. So you really have to make sure that once you have the grades, once you have the GMAT score, you have to do more to really stand out in what you actually do in real life. Then, other elements that can be highly detrimental is someone who has a great profile but has a terrible essay, an essay that is not tailored to the school, an essay that doesn't say anything about the school or about the student. Sometimes students come to me and explain to me that they have an essay that they can use for all of the different schools. That's just not how it works. You really need to tailor your essay specifically for each school you apply to. Maybe refer to certain professors in the school. And just a couple other examples. Sometimes the resume just doesn't fit the U.S. standards, and that can be detrimental for an application as well. If you do have outstanding activities, but you cannot quantify them, you cannot put them in a very compelling way in your resume, you're not going to get in. And the last element is that at the very end of the application process, let's say you have everything, you have the essay, you have the resume, you have the leadership experience and the GMAT and TOEFL score, but then you can bomb your interview. So you really have to be ready also to be compelling in the interview process, which is the very end of the application process. So it's a tough process. I know there's so many variables that we need to look into and take into account, but you really have to make sure that every single piece of element in your application is tailored to the school and responds to the requirements of the school.
All right. Thank you so much. I'm pretty sure a lot of students are going to find that thing helpful. Now, before I switch over to Prajakta, I've got this one more query. So I read this article from a guy named Frank, and who was mentioning that, if you don't have a business idea, that will probably change once you get into an Ivy college, because you are surrounded by so many intelligent and bright minds that, eventually that thing changes and you come up with a business idea. So I wanted to know what's exactly like, how true is that statement? Or is that aura actually works like that?
Yeah, that you change your mind once you get into the program. Is it what you said?
No, so the guy just mentioned, I'll rephrase it again, so that if you don't have a business idea, that will probably change, because the aura, because you're surrounded by so many intelligent and bright minds that it actually makes you think more.
Yeah,
So,
well, yeah. The people at these schools tend to be very high achieving students. So the impact, usually what the way I like to think about is once you get into Harvard, or once you get into Stanford, you brag about it. You're gonna be very happy. You're gonna brag about it. Once you get into this school, you're not gonna brag anymore, because you'll be surrounded by other very intelligent people. That's kind of what happened to me when I got into Yale. I was very happy. I was telling everyone. And then once I got into Yale, I just realized that, okay, well, now it's another level. I need to level up. I need to step up my game, and I need to be on point with all of my classes, my intervention in classes, my tests, my exams. So it's still a work in progress once you get into the school. It's not, vacation at all. You still need to work very hard.
you heard the man, people. Even if you get into Ivy College, you still can't brag about it. Over to
Yeah,
Prajakta now.
exactly.
Thank you so much, Priya. Thank you so much
Thank
for
you.
that.
Thank you, Varun. Thank you. Priya, before I invite our next person to be asking the question, I would like to, understand for my own knowledge. So, if an individual happens to graduate from any of the Ivy League colleges, what is the average CTC or the package one can expect? And ideally, what would you suggest to the student, to graduate if he wants to pursue a job, or he would want to start something of his own? What is more lucrative and what is more advisable?
So once you graduate, what's the best kind of career path? Is it what you asking about? Yeah. So
Yes.
again, there's no one way to think about it. I mean, students have lots of different interests. Sometimes I work with students who know that what they want to do is finance. Sometimes I know that some students come to me and they know that what they want to do is social work, social entrepreneurship. So once you get into an MBA program, you have to think about your future. You have to think about what you want to do next. But there's really no one way to think about it. You can start a business in the US if you want. You can apply as a E2 investor and create your own business. You can work and be sponsored by a company to work in a certain industry or certain field. There's really no one way to think about it when it comes to the kind of job that will help you be successful or make money. It's all about what students want to do. And when they tell me what they want to do, and that's when we look for schools that would be a good fit for the student. And again, we're talking about Ivy League schools, we're talking about top business programs. Harvard is not necessarily the best fit for someone, because Harvard does not have the curriculum that the student is looking for. So it's important to look beforehand and really make sure that the students find the best fit for them in the US. So, and sometimes the top business programs are not necessarily the best fit for my students.
Okay. While choosing any candidate, for giving the final verdict if the person is able to make it or not, apart from assessing the person on his, academic records and the background and the kind of percentage the person holds, to what extent does extracurricular activity play a role? Do you, really give a lot of emphasis if somebody is probably not having great percentage, or he may not be as qualified as per the criteria in every section, but then the person has a good amount of caliber and potential in some other subjects or other areas? Will that be taken into consideration while selection process?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I could have talked about this a bit more. When I explained that you need to have a certain GMAT score, you need to have a certain TOEFL score, you need to have certain grades. That's for the most of the students, but there's also exceptions to the rule. And when you talk about extracurricular activities, someone with an outstanding extracurricular activity who maybe started a nonprofit or started a business that raised millions or that made millions, we're talking about unique extracurricular activities. And in that case, schools will look beyond GMAT scores, so we'll look beyond the transcript to look at the potential of the student. And I can tell you that every year at Harvard or Stanford, the students with very bad grades, very low grades, or very low GMAT scores that do get into the schools because of what they've accomplished. So if you're outstanding, if you've done something incredible in your life and you want to get into an MBA, and you don't have the transcript, you don't have the GMAT score, you don't have the TOEFL score, or you don't write English very well, you should still apply, because it's a holistic process. They look at everything in your application, and sometimes even if you don't have the grades, even if you don't have the right standardized test score, you can still get in because of what you did. Yeah, so that's a great question. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you. I would like to invite Ria once again for asking the next question. Ria, can you please join in?
Hello, sir.
Hello again.
Yes, sir. So, sir, I'm pursuing GMAT for MBA, and my question is, what is the common or biggest mistake a candidate makes during application or GDPI round?
Yeah, so I would say, so in the application, the biggest mistakes, or the mistake that I see most often with the students who do have a good GMAT, who do have a good transcript, is not spending enough time on the essay. Lots of students think that the essay is just, another piece of information that you need to have. It's actually what can make or break an application. And I can tell you that some students got into the school not because of their transcripts or GMAT that were just average, but because of how they talk about themselves in the essay. So that's another very important and central element of the application. And students tend to slack off on this and feel like the essay is, as long as you talk about what you've accomplished, you're good. That's not what it's all about. The essay, there's a part in your application to talk about what you've done, and it's called the resume. The essay is something where you have to talk about yourself, where you have to show that you're mature enough for the school. And when you can show that you can actually add something to the school and that you will help the school shine also, you have to put yourself in the shoes of the admissions officers and not think about yourself. Admissions officers are looking for students who can actually have an impact once they get into the school. And that's what the essay is all about, showing that you can really add something valuable to the school. And that's, I mean, to your question, I think students tend to bump the essay very often.
Thank you so much, sir. I
Sure.
would like Prajakta to.
Okay. Hi, Pierre. Pierre, a very imperative factor I just happened to strike in my mind while I was listening to your insights and anecdotes. A person or a candidate who's aspiring to crack Ivy League, he could be good in verbal communication. He could be having a good academic record, but then his essay writing skills are not really up to the mark, as expected, to live up to the standards. So how does one improvise or rectify when it comes to, that specific parameter? Because that is going to be considered a very crucial part in the overall assessment procedure. So what are your tips on somebody who is probably lacking the skills which are, expected out of a potential aspirant, and that would make a very big difference during the final selection? How does one go about it?
Yeah, that's a good question. And actually, Ahmad will join us later today, a former student, worked with us for not specifically, we worked on different aspects of his applications, but we worked on the essay together as well. So when it comes to the essay, there's no one way to think about it. The best way to start is by brainstorming and finding the right way to talk about yourself. The main issue that students have when they talk about the essay is that they apply things on the resume to the essay, and they just transcribe things that were on their leadership experience, work experience, and they just put it into writing in their essay. That's not what students are looking for. So if students feel strongly about getting into an MBA program or highly competitive MBA, I think the best way to start is to brainstorm maybe with the family members or friends, or if you can afford it, with a consultant, to make sure that you're on track and to make sure that you are actually responding to the requirements of the school.
Okay, thank you for addressing that so perfectly. I believe we have Ahmad, who's joined in already. Hi, may I please request you to unmute yourself?
Hello, can you hear me?
Hi, yes, perfectly.
Thank you for having me. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, pleasure. So we have been pretty impressed with your background. We've heard so much about you that you are doing undergraduate program from Howard at such a tender age, which is quite impressive. It's a great achievement for a lot of people. I'm sure you are going to be an inspiration to a lot of people who intend to be there. And would you like to talk about your journey? What how did you land up in Howard, and how much time did you invest during?
Prajakta, just wait a minute. I think Ahmad, your screen is tilted.
You turn sideways, Ahmad.
Sideway, Ahmad.
Oh, okay. Let me see.
Yes,
Yeah.
this
Does
is
this work?
much better.
Yeah,
Yes.
all set.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Okay,
Ahmad.
sweet.
So, Ahmed, I firstly want to know that since how long you've been doing the preparation to get into Howard, and what did it take you to get there, and ideally how much time you have to spend on your education, on your studies, to live up to the protocols and to live up to the standards of Howard University, because not everybody is able to get through such a prestigious college. So would you like to give some tips or any suggestions on that?
Right. I'm going to talk about my experience applying to competitive schools in the U.S., including Harvard, just like you've talked about some components of my application and working with agency as a company. So I started thinking about applying to prestigious colleges. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you fine.
Okay, great. Okay. So I started thinking about applying to a prestigious college in an Ivy League around the time I was in 10th grade. That's when I became more interested in applying to a prestigious university and began to do my own research on college admissions and the process, and started to seek the guidance of some of my teachers. Of course, it was difficult since since in my particular school, there wasn't a lot of people who applied to such Ivy League colleges. So it was a challenge trying to navigate through the process in such an early year without really having someone who's been through the experience of applying for college. And then I began to participate in different activities that I found interesting and fulfilling. It started really when I began to join different clubs that centered around different fields of study. And then over the next 2 years, over the rest of my high school career, that's when I started to narrow down my focus from about 7 to 8 extracurricular activities to about 2 or 3 that I found myself really passionate about and that were pertaining to a certain field. In my case, that was political science. So the more I became engaged at my school level when it comes to political science and when it comes to activism and public service, I started to attend conferences at the local level and then moving on to the regional level and the state level. And I even had the opportunity of representing my state in one of the activities at the national level. So I think what was really important in my journey and in my application experience was joining clubs and showing colleges that I had an impact in the club, and not just that I joined and attended some meetings, but rather that I had the commitment as demonstrated by the leadership positions that I was able to get. So over 2 to 3 years in my high school, I was able to demonstrate that I was able to commit my time and effort to certain clubs, and certain causes. And that's what I think made colleges see through my application that it's going to make me fit in the Harvard community, and that it's something that I'm really passionate about and will be pursuing even after college. So of course I did that. Yeah. So of course I did that while maintaining the different aspects of the application. I continued to do my best to stand out among my peers in high school, and also maintain standardized test scores. I think a great thing about colleges is that they do their best to take into consideration your school, your environment, your demographic, and other factors that to ensure that your application is being evaluated as fairly as possible. So for example, from my personal experience, I didn't go to middle school in the States. So high school was my first year, or my first 4 years coming here, and colleges were able to understand that since I didn't do any activities in 9th grade, and that I spent it adjusting, and I think that all college admissions officers were understanding of that fact, and in fact, they probably saw it as a good thing that I was able to try to stand out among my friends, despite being a little late to the process. Especially as I mentioned earlier, a lot of my friends from high school didn't really apply to Ivy League schools, so that also helped me and showed them that I was able to go above and beyond, not just in terms of extracurriculars, but also test scores. So moving on to the different components of my application, I made sure to stay consistent when it comes to the message throughout all the different aspects of my application. So as I mentioned earlier, I applied as a political science major, and I tried my best to emphasize and to show them through my extracurriculars, through my activities, and through my essay, that it was something that I was going to pursue through, as they've seen in the past 4 years, and as well as in the next 4 years, hopefully. I also got the chance to interview for a Harvard alum, and I was able to answer questions like, why do you want to study political science? And why have you applied for Harvard? And really thinking about a personal experience, and why that has led me to enter this field, along with what I had done so far, I think was really important in my application. So I was also able to demonstrate how my passion was able to develop over time. As I stated earlier, started with about 8 to 9 activities, and then began to narrow them down. They were in different fields all over the place, from robotics, from whatever different fields. And then I started to show that I was committed to the field of leadership and public service. Now, going back to your question about the college essay, it took me about 2 months to write my college essay. And really, just like Pierre was saying, it consumed most time brainstorming and thinking of the right essay prompt that I wanted to answer, and which one I think would demonstrate that I was fit in the Harvard community, and that I would fit in their well-rounded class. Because those Ivy League and prestigious colleges, they want a student with specific interest who has shown that they're passionate about a certain field, so that they can grow and learn in their well-rounded class. So working with agency has been a great experience. Early in my senior year, around the time of the application season, I was honestly lost. I would say that, honestly, if it weren't for agency, I probably wouldn't have gotten accepted into Harvard. So while working on my college application, among the many things that I did with agency, I was able to work with different consultants on things as simple as creating a college list, so that we ensured that I had a great shot at getting accepted
Ahmad,
into a great
sorry
university.
to interrupt. Sorry to cut you off.
Yeah.
So apart from applying in Harvard, which other colleges were you targeting?
So Harvard was my reach school. It was my dream school, and I also applied to Columbia. I applied to Williams College. I applied to a college here in the University of New Mexico, and I applied to Duke University, and I was
Okay.
accepted to all of them. Yeah.
Okay. And if you could, quickly run through the experience of giving the interview, which is one of the most crucial factor. Not everybody is able to understand what are they expecting out of you. So how different it is from your own expectations? How was your personal experience while, addressing the questions they were throwing at you? If you would like to, give a little insight and elaborate on that part.
Absolutely. So those interviews are generally conducted by an alum of the university that I had applied to. In the case of Harvard, I was able to interview with a person who was in a town that's close to me. I live in a small town, so there aren't any alums from any of these colleges. So I only interviewed with two of the colleges that I had applied to, those being Harvard and Columbia.
Okay.
And what I did in order to prepare ahead of time was I looked online some of the questions that they generally asked. There are a lot of very general questions that they ask, like, why have you chosen your major? Why have you chosen art college? And I tried to think of reasons while linking them to my personal experience, and why I think I would be the best fit to take the spot of a political science student at Harvard. And yeah, I think just I've done my best to explain how that would be a perfect fit for me, and just how I will be as a student for the next 4 years at the institution.
I think that's pretty impressive considering, the age factor. I think you're very determined and you're having the right vision, and we wish you all the very best. We hope that you're able to soar to greater heights and you achieve the highest of pinnacle with your best of endeavor. Having said that, I would like to ask a question to Pio. Pio, since, a lot of participants are Indians right now, I'm sure there are a lot of people who are dreaming about getting into one of the top B schools abroad. So if somebody is wanting to apply from India, for instance, what is the ratio of Indian students that you usually consider for the application? How many Indian students make it to Ivy League colleges on an average?
Yeah, good question. I started working with Indian students very recently, about 6 months ago. I was mostly working with high school students who wanted to apply to colleges, but I've been working recently with more and more MBA applicants who wanted to get into not necessarily Ivy League schools, Ivy League B schools, but top B schools. The first thing we have to know is that we'll be honest with the students on their chances of getting into a top B school. So there's an assessment phase, and we can't guarantee that a student will get into a top B school just because they work with us. So that's why I usually advise students to come to us very early in the process, beginning of college, or even beginning of a high school for students who want to get into a top college. When it comes to preparation and to working with students, our students got into all IVs, into all of the top 10 business programs in the US, and that includes international students, international clients that we work with, and domestic students, so US students and US applicants. So we've had success with every single school in the top 10 colleges and top 10 B schools. But again, there's all of these schools require a lot of preparation. Ahmad said that he did everything he could to really shape his profile and find the right activities for him. And that was trying to find his niche, trying to find what was really important for him, and that was political science. So when we work with the students early on, we can really help them maximize the time and find the best angle to make the application successful. So again, if someone comes to me just 2 months before the application deadline and says, I want to get into Harvard, I want to get into Yale, or I want to get into MIT, we'll be honest. We'll take a look at all of the
factors, parameters,
yeah,
factors.
Exactly, and all of the material that we gather from him, which is transcript, family information, resume, background, and based on that, we'll be able to build a list of schools. So when we build this list of schools, we have rich schools, target schools, and safety schools. When it comes to rich schools, which are schools that are very hard to get into, they can apply to as many of them. You got to give it a try. But again, it's always best to start early, even a couple of years before the application deadline, to make sure that you're on track.
All right, thank you, Pio. I would also like to know from each country, do you have like a limit for the applications to consider for students or aspirants who want to apply for Ivy League? Like, is there any specific ratio that you keep in mind that from one specific country, this is the limit or this is the number of students we need to, take into account?
Yeah, you mean from the school perspective, are there quotas
Yes.
for?
Yes.
No,
yes.
there's no quotas per se. They do tend to have the same percentage of international students, but that's international students. That's not just Indian students or Chinese students. In some schools, for instance, 90% of the international students are Chinese students. So there's no one way to think about quotas. When I work with students, I just try to make them the most competitive they can be in the application process, regardless of their nationality. It can definitely help to come from a tiny country where there's usually just one applicant per year from this country, because you stand out a little more. Your profile tends to be more interesting and more unique. But really, it's all about being the most competitive applicant you can be, regardless of your nationality, regardless of where you come from.
All right. I have, I think, a final question before we can wrap it up and close it. During the challenging and unprecedented times, we all are facing since COVID has hit the entire globe. So what is the call this college has taken? Will they continue the way they have been conducting the whole format, or will it be online module, or what form, and what form when admission will start? Is there going to be any kind of difference in the teaching pattern and in the learning, in the learning pattern as well from the student's perspective? How are you coping up and dealing with the whole current scenario?
Yeah, that's a good question. And Ahmad and I have been talking about this a lot, because Ahmad is going to start at Harvard in a couple of months. And we still don't know, really. Schools don't have a definitive answer. We don't know if they're going to be online. We don't know if they're going to be in person. What we know is that some schools have decided. At Harvard, I think there's 9 or 10 departments, or I mean schools, not colleges not included, that have decided to be completely online. Some colleges are committed to being in person, but honestly, even if they give a response now and say that they'll be in person in 2 months, if the health authorities tell them that they have to close because of the pandemic, they will. So the end decision is not going to be colleges, but it's going to be states and the federal government choosing based on the location, based on the cluster of the pandemic and COVID-19 cases, whether or not the school needs to be open, or if the school needs to close and be completely online. So not clear yet. Looks like cases are going up in some states, cases are going down in others. So we'll have to wait and see, and fingers crossed, hopefully everything will be in person.
All right. I think this has been a phenomenal webinar, so much to imbibe, so much to look forward to, too many takeaways, and thank you for sharing all your valuable insights and anecdotes. We have Varun, who would like to ask a final question before I invite Mr. Aman Singh Chawla, who's the founder and CEO of Global Mentor Academy, who would like to close the session, and he'll be giving you the word of thanks on behalf of the entire academy. But before that, we have Varun as of now. Varun, hi there.
Yeah, hi there. Hi again. I've got a question for Ahmed. Yeah, hi Ahmed, how's it going?
It's going great. How are you?
I'm fine, man. Thank you. I believe you are an Avenger now. Harvard and everything.
Thank you so much.
My
Appreciate
question,
it.
yeah. So my question was pretty simple, and yet I would say that it's going to be helpful for a lot of students. So how exactly you stay focused and you stay, on the days when you can't really concentrate? So how exactly do you stay focused? Like how exactly you keep reminding yourself, okay, you're going to have to keep your eyes on the prize. You're going to have to stay focused. How exactly do you do that? Because not every day you can actually, focus with the same level of energy, right?
Yeah, absolutely. There are some days where I don't feel like studying or working. What I generally like to do is just take some time off for the day, and then try to refocus time and find meaning in what I'm about to do. I also like to daydream of myself becoming a doctor, or because that's what I want to do. So I think of myself becoming a doctor, and that motivates me to continue studying and continue working. And so I really think it depends on the person. If there's something that you find meaningful in your life, if there's something that you want to achieve, thinking about that and making it your everyday reality while you strive towards it is really the goal, and that's the motivation that's going to keep you even in times of difficulty, which you'll encounter. There are times where I really don't feel like studying, and there are days where I don't study. So it's really about finding what truly motivates you, and what you want to accomplish and want to do in life. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does. So if I'm not mistaken, it's okay to take some time off, get your PS4 and play some Call of Duty, right?
Absolutely. I can play with you too.
All right, I'll send you the username. Over to Prajakta now. Thank you so much, Ahmed.
Perfect.
Appreciate it.
Appreciate it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Appreciate it.
I think having individual decorum and sense of discipline is a must if you intend to grow and evolve as a person. And I think that was rightly addressed. Thank you for that wonderful tip. As of now, we have Aman Singh Chawla, who's been waiting to share his words of wisdom, and kindly I request him to join us. Hi Aman, are you there? Are we connected?
Yeah, I'm connected. Thank you.
Can't see you.
Yeah, it's okay. Actually, some problem is going on.
Okay, sure.
So first of all, I would really like to thank Ahmed Al-Sheikh to join us today, and you are just you to come, and the way you have spoken. I think most of the people who are attending this webinar are undergraduate level who want to go for masters, and I think they'll be highly motivated by the way you have spoken and the clarity of thoughts you have in your mind. I think it's just wonderful. I think because as a part ACBM Global Mentor Academy, the main idea of this ACBM is like we are basically four square structure of where we transfer from academic to corporate to business, and business to mentor. So this is a journey of Ahmed, you, me, and everyone in the life. So basically, if your academic is very poor, or you don't know where you are, where you are landed up, so definitely you will not never reach to the place where you want to be. So I think the way you have spoken, I think it has motivated not only me but a lot of people and students who have come to attend this webinar, because clarity of thoughts is very much important when you're selecting any career. And I think that career, the word C in the career starts with the letter called as C, and C stands for the word called as choice. And I think you have made your choice, and first thing is choice you have made. I think that's where you are getting up into. And last but not the least, I want to thank Pierre over here who came, we just discussed it out on Facebook one day. Okay, we want to have, this session for Indian, and, many people are looking forward for such kind of session. So just to share with you, a lot of Indians who really want to have a dream to go into Ivy League college, not only Ivy League, but, top colleges, as you mentioned, that, they are not Ivy, but still they are top, as far as MBA is concerned. They still can apply over there, but that they don't know the correct procedure. Now, I was very shocked to know this. In fact, I knew this before, but you have really cleared the my mind that even if you're not good in, if you're not able to score a good marks in your GMAT or, something like that, but still if you have capability and you show in your essay and you have different ways to get into that Ivy League college, I think that is fantabulous. And most of the students in India, they will definitely hear this and they will try to work on their strength, which I believe you have given today, clarity on thoughts. And again, I would like to thank Prajakta to join us today on this forum, and all the students who are inside the Zoom will ask you wonderful questions. And again, I would like to conclude this webinar by only giving one thought for the food for thought to everyone, that everybody today in the entire globe have the world called as information, and information today is overloaded. And the idea is information need to be converted into the knowledge, and the gap which fills between information and knowledge is the advisor or consultant or the one who has the knowledge about it. So I think we are very proud to have you as our global partner for as an HNC education. And I think today together, I think we can enlighten a lot of people in India, and where they really want to go for IV, and not only IV, I think, right, Pierre? So we have a lot of colleges.
Yeah.
For
Sorry, please go ahead, Aman.
yeah, please go on. Please go on. Yeah, please.
No, I was just saying, it's any school in the US, we can help with any application, any type of profile, and it's all about finding the best fit. And as I mentioned, sometimes, Harvard was a great fit for Ahmad because he wanted to do something very specific, but other students come to us feel like Harvard is the best fit when there's other programs that are best for them. So it's all about finding the best fit college or the best fit master program or MBA program.
Correct. So I think as we were discussing, yesterday only, when we were going through the question set, and when we mentioned that it's not only about the Ivy League, but also the top colleges which HNC education does, and also the way you have shown me, the various areas where students can work upon, and they can really get into, and they will not be misguided by people, by saying, only you can apply, but definitely if you are there as a global partner, definitely a lot of things can happen, and I think we get the right audience. Because the way I think Ahmed has answered a lot of questions in the most structured way. Now I think pretty much we and everybody is confident the way you are mentoring students over there. So I think we are really thankful, Pierre, that you came on the board today. And I wish that this journey continues over for a lifelong, and we should have a lifelong extension.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It was great
Thanks
to
for
talk about
Thank
the
you.
admissions process. Thank you very much.
Pierre,
Thank you.
before you see you sign off, I just want to tell everybody, actually HNC education which you have started. I just want to know from my side, what is your final goal, or what is your mission in this HNC? If you can just let me know about that. This will be very great to an inspire story, because I want to know from you. Because like in ACBM, we have only one parameter that we really want to, like I would say that we want to mentor student in such a way that it's an unbiased platform. A student should not get misleaded. So I want to know from you, what is that one thing or one thing in your mind that HNC education stands for according to you?
Yeah, that's a good question. And obviously, the end goal of HNC is the admissions process, the application process, getting into the best school for our students. But what we do best really is leadership development. We help students find things they care about and build upon this thing, try to build their resume in a very genuine, in a very authentic way so that they can stand out naturally in the process. Lots of consultants try to do it in a more artificial way and try to package students. And what we do by starting very early and brainstorming with our students is try to find things that they actually care about so that they can enjoy the process and can have an impact that is natural for them. It's something that they care about and that they want to do. And that's what we do at HNC is leadership development in an authentic way, really.
Okay, that's great. I have this one before I signing off. I wanted to ask you this. There are certain small courses like 3 days, 4 days, 1 week, 6 months courses which Harvard does. Or this kind of B school done, and they call you over the campus to see what kind of this is going on. Right now, they're immersion, which called global immersion programs. So, what is your take view on that? That's the last question I would like to ask, because many of the people are going for global immersions from India. They would like to know about this. So, if people have asked this question, is there any opportunity for such kind of program in Ivy League also?
Yeah, so there's lots of programs that are Ivy League related or that are hosted by Ivy League schools. So it's very important to see if the program is actually sponsored or created by the school. I can mention lots of different programs in the Ivy League, for instance, that are hosted at Yale, Columbia, or Princeton, but that are not actually real Ivy League programs. They have the name, they pay for the name, but they're not necessarily created and hosted by the school, but not necessarily created and directed by the school. So you need to do research in advance to make sure that the program itself is a program that belongs to the school itself. But finally, what I would say is that just because you attend a 3-day or 5-day program at a university isn't going to necessarily drastically increase your chances of getting into the school down the road. What you really need is a very impactful background and resume, and just doing a summer program or a pre-college program at Harvard or Princeton isn't going to drastically change increase your chances of getting into the school.
Thank you, Perry, joining us. Thank you, Emma, joining us, and thanks for a wonderful time. And Thank you, Prajakta,
Thank
and
you.
everybody. Yeah,
Thank
Prajakta,
you so
are-
much.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to say thank you and express my gratitude to Pure. Thank you. I think you've been a wonderful orator. We've learned a lot from you. It has been an absolute privilege to hear from you this evening, and we definitely look forward to, hearing more from you in the coming times. And thank you for sharing your vision, all the expertise that you have given away. I'm sure it has been of great help to all the students out there who've been listening to this webinar and who are going to be watching the video on YouTube. And having said that, once again, thank you for joining in and adding so much of value today and basically beautifying this wonderful webinar with your presence. And once again, thank you, Ahmad. You are a bright student with definitely a brighter future. So we wish you all the very best for your future and keep shining.
Thank you so much.
Thank
It was
you.
my pleasure being here.
Thank you.
Take
Thank
care.
you.
Bye-bye.
Please take care. Thank you. Bye.